I started with like a small little Instagram account where I would post divorce content. And now with almost 365,000 followers, I think it really goes to show you that there are so many people out there who are either what I call divorce curious and wanting to make the leap or are going through it.
Michelle Dempsey-Multack, thank you for being on here with me time again and again and again. You and I do stuff together all the time. Parents who are either contemplating divorce, are divorced, or wonder about this, or have friends or family who are going through this, they really could benefit from just so much you have to share.
I'm going to just put that energy on my kids because I can't control be as a parent on their own parenting time with my child.
But know that hard work you're doing is enough. It's helping your child get through it. It's helping your child thrive. It's helping your child feel security. It's going to help your child feel okay.
It takes one stable and consistent parent in order for a child to thrive. My whole life changed when I took a step back and I stopped trying to change my ex's feelings.
Welcome to Help Them Bloom, your home away from home for parenting support. I'm Evelyn Mendal, child and parenting expert, and on this podcast, we're going to talk about all things child development, mental health, yours and your child's, and how we can use science-backed parenting strategies to preserve what really matters, our human connection with our kids. On Help Them Bloom, I sit down with experts to explore the influences, both good and bad, that drive kids to become who they are. Join me on this journey of parenting with more compassion, self-awareness, and a commitment to do your best as you gain all these new insights. Together, we're going to discover how to stay truly connected to our children, even through the toughest of moments. Let's bloom together. Hi, and welcome, Michelle.
Hi.
Michelle is not only my dear friend, she is also a divorce coach, co-parenting specialist, and also best-selling author of Moms Moving On, a really, really, really handy book for anyone who is contemplating separation or in the middle of going through something like that. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for finding value in these conversations because I think like you and I both know, having been divorced and, growing through that process as co-parents, you learn so much, and each phase of a child's life is going to bring something new, and you can double that when you have a child of divorce. And so I love continuing to have these conversations.
So important. So important. We also know that divorce rates they're pretty high. I mean, I don't know. What's the current statistic there? Do you know?
I mean, it fluctuates. It went up a lot during COVID. It was up about 60%. And, now it like hovers in the 50 to 55% range. But I think also, though, many people are choosing to not get married and then end up separating. So, but I hear from more and more people each day. I started with like a small little Instagram account where I would post divorce content. And now with almost 365,000 followers, I think it really goes to show you that there are so many people out there who are either what I call divorce curious and wanting to make the leap or are going through it. And it's a very real thing.
Work with moms one-on-one all the time. You have these groups you run, all these things. What are the concerns you're seeing people come to you with mostly?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's so funny, not funny, but I work with moms and dads now and all walks of life, from like celebrities to the average parent to high earning, low income, everything, every background, every culture. And the number one thing I see across the board are parents not recognizing how their emotions about the divorce are dictating the way they co-parent, the way they're writing their parenting plans, and the way they're treating their children as a result of it. And something that I preach over and over again is that you have to love your child more than you hate your ex, but it's really hard to do when you're in the midst of like your ego feeling attacked and your future hanging in the balance.
So when people ask, because people lately, it's been interesting. I've gotten an influx of a lot of these cases that I'm getting one-on-one also seem to be separations or divorces, and how to kind of approach this with their kids. But all of these parents that come to me, they clearly come to me because they want to do right by their child. But they come to me thinking like, will divorce mess up my child? And I'm like, depends on you guys, right? Like, it's not really the divorce. It's really what happens surrounding the divorce, mainly with you guys. I know this is something that you preach a lot too.
Yeah, and I think it's great that so many parents are reaching out for the support, but that's like the first step, right? Like
Mm.
you can reach out for the support, but then you also have to recognize the role that you're playing in your own situation. And a lot of moms, particularly, will come to me in distress about they want their kids to be okay. They want their kids to be okay, but they're focusing on what they think their ex is doing wrong or not doing enough of, and they're not willing to look at what they could change. And so, reaching out for the help is great, but you also have to recognize that divorce doesn't mess up the kids. We do.
Hmm.
Like, divorce is a change, and our children go through changes all the time.
Hmm.
I mean, it's how we
They're
teach them
adaptive.
and help them to adapt to the
Yeah.
change that makes the difference. And I always say, like, through my own parents' divorce, I think I would have been so much more okay if someone would have just said, like, here's some help to navigate
Mm.
these really difficult times, and it's like for your daughter and mine, they know nothing different. They've been in a co-parented situation since they're 2, and it's the fact that they have like consistent support at home that allows them to feel like their life is normal. Like, what's the big deal here?
Yeah. Taking into account your own childhood, because you are a child of divorce, and then what you're doing different with Bella. It's
Yeah,
it's a lot.
it's a
I almost
lot.
said everything, but
It's my whole life, and it's
mm,
honestly a full-time job because so much of that is seeing what comes up, the challenges that come up in my own co-parenting experience and what I'm worried will affect Bella also brings to light things that I experienced that I didn't even realize like were
mm,
still affecting me or that I have to heal from. So I literally spend
mm,
every week of my life like I'm doing the work to help her co-parenting. I'm doing the work to help my inner child. I'm
yeah,
doing the work to like put everything aside and just focus on being present. You can't constantly be in a state of like fixing and healing. But
yeah,
I unfortunately had a really, really, really terrible situation. And I always say, like, even if my divorce situation was bad, it wouldn't even like scratch the surface of what I experienced. So on the day to day, I go to bed at night feeling like, okay,
she's okay.
she will never have to feel what I felt as a child. Why? Even though her dad and I don't always see eye to eye, she has consistent love and support on both sides. That was something I didn't have. Plus, there was a lot of abuse. And I mean, my parents' divorce started when I was 8 and finalized when I was 18. It was 10 years of
Wow.
battling and showdowns and police officers and arrests and me going to court, and I had to eventually become estranged from my own father. That's not what's happening for my child, so at
Mm,
least like that's good. But what I've learned is really you have to provide a consistent way to support your child through their feelings about the divorce while also supporting their relationship with the other parent. And where that becomes hard is when your child comes home and says, I don't like that daddy did this or said that. And, your natural instinct is like, well,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
why do you think we
No,
got divorced?
yeah,
Right. But
exactly.
you then have to support your child and validate their feelings without throwing the other parent under the bus, without completely gaslighting your child. So it's
Hmm.
tough. It's
It's
tough.
really tough to stay neutral. And I think that's really kind of the best place to stay is neutrality, bringing neutrality into it. But it is really tough, right? Because you're right. You're balancing your own, like a lot of times you haven't even healed from your own feelings
Hmm.
about towards this person or about the divorce or the separation. And so it is hard. Also, not just, I think the other way, not just when they're saying this, they had this really bad experience, or when they come home and they're like, my dad is the best. He
Hmm.
does all these things and he
Hmm.
took me to Disney and he bought me all these things. And you have a lot you want to say in response to that.
It's
But
so funny you bring that up. Yes, because I had a situation like that last night where like, you know, I am Bella's ride or die. She knows that. She knows that like if she calls from school because like her eyelash hurts, like I'm there. Like I'm
and she
fixing it.
does. And she does
Right.
call.
And she calls 3 times a day because she's besties with the school secretary. But last night at her dance recital, and this was her first year taking dance because when she was younger, her dad really felt she needed to play sports. Sports are more important. Sports are what keeps girls, from going down the wrong path. And team sports are amazing, and they are. But we learned very quickly that Bella's
Not
not
for
an
her.
athlete. She's a performer. She'd be doing handstands and cartwheels on the soccer field, you know? So she finally started taking dance this year. I mean, I'm at every practice and I was getting her ready for this, and she was comfortable getting on stage. But the second I went to the room to pick her up, her first question was, "Where's daddy?"
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was like, okay, hi. But at the same time, I was like, holy shit. I spent every dance recital, Evelyn, just frozen on stage, looking out into the audience to see if my dad was there. And he never was. He never was. Sometimes he would show up after with a bouquet of flowers and be like, good job, but he was never there. And in that moment, I had a flashback of myself, like feeling that sense of, oh, he's not here. And Bella also questioning, is he here?
Yeah.
And he was, and
Oh,
he had
good.
flowers, and he was so excited. And he called her last night before bed to tell her again how beautiful she was and how well she did. And I'm like, you know what? For all the times him and I don't get along, like, she's got it all.
And you were able to rise above your ego at that moment because at that moment that's hurtful, right? It's like I'm here
Yeah.
too.
But that's the
It's a
thing is
lot of
like,
that work.
yeah, I know I'm always there. Like I'm always
But
in her face.
you have to do the work to even feel that on a constant. You have to feel secure enough for that.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes parents don't.
But I think that that's where my traumatic childhood and my experience as a child of divorce, becomes my superpower. Because in that moment, while there was like a flickering second of ego, it was like, God, like how I would have loved to my mom to be able to say, yes, your dad is
He's
here, you
here.
know? So,
Yeah.
so I knew where that question was coming from. And I know that like a daughter seeking a father's approval and getting it is
Yeah. Yeah.
tremendously important.
This is constantly, I think, poking at our ego. I had this experience yesterday. I took my kids to Disney, and all she would talk about in the last like 2 hours is like, can we go home early so I could see my dad? And I was like, you're going to see your dad in an hour. An hour later, and you're going
Listen,
to see,
kid. Yeah.
Like, do you know how this body is feeling right now after 3 days of Disney? But I did feel this like total, like physiological reaction in my body being like, I just want to shake her and let her know how much I do for her. And her dad does too. He is like, we're 50-50. He is an unbelievable father. So it has nothing to do with him. It was my own ego in the moment. And I still get those triggers, and I still get those reactions, and I still and I answered like that. I'm like, you're going to see him an hour later. It's fine. But I'm not really. Then I realized like, it's not about that. Like, she's missing her dad. She's allowed to miss her dad. Her life is very much, a lot of times, very separate. And it doesn't always feel natural for her. And she probably always feels like she wishes. She said this the other day when we were on the way to Disney. She said, I haven't taken that many trips with him, and I take so many more trips with you. And that was, it was a lot, because on the one hand, I was like, well, that doesn't sound very grateful. But on the other hand, I was like, she's just talking about how she wants to experience similar things with him and at these adventures with him. And it is a lot of ego work, because it's not about us.
No, but here's the thing is I'm able to recognize my ego from what's important because of my own experience, and you are as well because of your experience as a therapist. But going back to what all parents deal with is this sense of, listen, our kids are our most important things to us in the world. We would throw ourselves in front of a bus for our kids, but the majority of people really feel justified in saying to their child, look what I just did for you this weekend. I just took you on a whole Disney weekend, and now you want to see your dad. When was the last time your dad did this for you?
Yes.
And as obnoxious as that sounds, more people are going to say that than be able to say, okay, you know what? Poor thing. She hasn't seen her dad in 3 days. Of course she misses her dad. And I posted a video about this once. Here's why your child would rather be with their other parent right now. And it has nothing to do with you, the parent that they're with, and has everything to do with this child is biologically part of both of you.
Yeah.
And they are wired to want to feel connected to both of us. So like when we take one of us out of the mix and just expect our child to not like to have them like out of sight, out of mind, it's a really unfair burden to put on the child.
It's a selfish thing that, Yeah, it's so true. And that's why a lot of it is, we know this from all of the work that you and I do, but most of it starts with us. It really does.
It starts with us.
Yeah. It starts with our inner work. What would you say to a parent who is trying so freaking hard so freaking hard to provide the love, the consistency, the warmth, the security, and then has a co-parent or another parent, I don't even know if to name them, a co-parent who it feels like they're sabotaging it all. Like, what would you say
Yeah.
to this parent who probably feels so defeated?
This is unfortunately most of what I see, but a lot of times what we perceive as the other person being high conflict, we have to like first take ourselves off like the internet therapy train. Like not everyone is high conflict
Or
and
a
not
narcissist.
everyone is a narcissist.
Yeah.
What we have to recognize again is our role in their behavior, right? So like if you feel your ex is consistently trying to sabotage your efforts, how are they doing that and why? Is it because you are resisting their attempts at being flexible? Are you constantly sending them messages about how to parent and articles to read about soda and the importance of bedtime? Like, are you staying out of their way? Let's look at that first. If you are, and they are just still completely, they cannot hold themselves together and stay in their own lane, this is probably indicative of a larger issue that they face in their lives in general. And first, you have to really depersonalize it and know that, like, right now they have their feelings, they're entitled to their feelings. My whole life changed when I took a step back and I stopped trying to change my ex's feelings. And I was like, you know what? He's entitled to his experience, he's entitled to his feelings about me. And instead of trying to control that and convince him of why he shouldn't feel that way, I'm going to just put that energy on my kids because I can't control the way this person feels about me or treats me or how they're even going to be as a parent with on their own parenting time with
Yeah.
my child. But I can control my own 50%. And anyone who knows me knows that like my 50% with Bella is like 200% because I'm going to give everything I can. I'm as intentional as I can be. I'm teaching the lessons. I'm giving the support. I'm giving the validation. I'm doing all the homework. I'm doing the PTA. Like I'm doing all of the things that I can do because I do know, like you taught me many years ago, it takes one stable and consistent parent in order for a child to thrive. And that's not to say her dad is not stable or consistent, but when things feel challenging to me with him, I know that all I can control is me, and I'm going to keep giving the best of me to my child.
And that
You're not,
is enough for her.
yes. And what you resist persists. You know, a lot of people will come to me and say, I just want to get my ex to stop behaving the way that they behave. And I'm like, well, sadly, you know, the more you keep flushing the clogged toilet to try and get the water down, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's going to continue to rise and become more of a problem. Let it go, let it settle. You're not going to change who they are. And you certainly, when you tell someone not to feel something, they're going to feel it more.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, you have to at a certain point recognize that this person is probably the common denominator in all of their life's issues. And they weren't going to become a better person once you split up.
Yeah. And just really honing in on what you said on knowing that the protective factor you're giving your child is you. It really is. And it's hard not to feel defeated in a situation like that when you're trying so hard, but know that that hard work you're doing is enough. It's enough. It's helping your child get through it. It's helping your child thrive. It's helping your child feel security. It's going to help your child feel okay. What advice do you give, Mish, when you have a situation when a parent is talking bad about the other parent and it starts to feel a little bit like they're alienating the
Yeah.
child from you?
This
Say.
can be so, so scary. And especially when children are younger, you know, a child will come home and say, well, daddy said that you threw him out of the house and didn't want to be married to him anymore. So I'm mad at you. So that can be, oh my God, you're like, oh, I've lost my kids. That's it. He won. It's over. Again, this is painful and triggering to hear, but if you pull back and recognize the level of stress that that comment puts on a child and the way a stressed out child will start to feel around the parent who is making them feel stressed, the alienating parent always loses the child. Maybe in the short term, they're brainwashing a little bit and they feel like they've got that child and they've won. But that is a very unsafe feeling for a child. And eventually that child is going to start to pull away. It may not happen tomorrow or next week, but it will happen. What you can't do is say, no, it's actually your dad who is the asshole and who caused the problems. And let me tell you why I left him. This is where Bill Eddy, who is the guru of all things high conflict, talks about the four big skills. And these are critical thinking skills for children because, again, it is a very fine line to walk between being honest with your kids and bashing the other parent. So in a
Let's go
situation
over
like,
them.
yeah, in a situation like this, you're going to want to say something to your child like, wow, how did that come up with daddy? I want to know more about that conversation. Well, daddy was mad because he doesn't like his new apartment and he says it's all your fault that you have to live there. Huh. Well, I'm sure. I mean, if I didn't like my new apartment, I'm sure I'd be really frustrated too. And then you start exploring like the feeling of the conversation, right? Like, how did it make you feel when daddy said that? And something that I've always done with my daughter in any situation with friends, with teachers, with her dad, how do you feel about this situation? I know that this is what your friend said, or this is what daddy said, but how do you feel? And have you ever had a feeling that was different from me or
Somebody
daddy,
else. Yeah.
right? Like, you think that Nutella is amazing. I think that it's gross. It doesn't
Yeah.
make you bad. It doesn't make me bad. So
Yeah.
we talk about nuance and we talk about people being able to have different opinions, right? So daddy is upset with mommy. You know, we got divorced, and that can be an upsetting thing for parents. And just because daddy has a certain feeling about something doesn't mean you have to. Just because I have a certain feeling about something doesn't mean you have to. And so it's really talking about the child being able to decide for themselves how they want to feel. And what we look at with critical thinking skills is flexible thinking, right? Like, not all or nothing. Mommy maybe did something to upset daddy. That doesn't make her bad. That doesn't make her good. That's a one situation thing. So we talk about moderating behaviors, flexible thinking, managed emotions. Like, this is all part of the four big skills for critical thinking. And critical thinking is, in general, a great lesson for your children because you want them to be independent thinkers.
Yeah.
You don't want them
This
to be.
No, this is has to bring like a huge relief to kids because I think they are wired to stay close, right? So that means a lot of times just kind of like going with what their parents say or what their parents believe. And so being able to that has to be so empowering to be like, you can be your own person and have
Mm-hmm,
your own separate feelings about
mm-hmm,
things or your own thoughts and your own beliefs. And you're right, that preps them for life, that preps
mm-hmm.
them to be able to really walk their own path and not, let's talk about even peer pressure. And then let's talk about just kind of doing things, going with the masses. Like, really, you're right. Like, these are important skills, but I think it's scary for a young kid, especially, to have to think about that when it comes to their parent, because there's this feeling all the time probably of like, who am I betraying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really, really hard. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the portion that you said, and I'm always going to go into this, is when you can show up for your child and show them that you can actually be okay around even the most uncomfortable topics. And even if they're like having all these kind of weird feelings, even if at that moment they were like, well, I kind of believe it. And I think you are I don't know that you are the best parent. That is a horrendous thing to hear. But if you reply to this in a very emotionally charged, defensive way, you bet your child is not going to open up about this stuff anymore in an authentic way. Right.
1,000%. And
So
you want them
you
to be able to.
you
And
want them to be able to.
so something that's really important that I always tell parents to say to their kids, and I say to Bella, is I'm so glad you brought that to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so happy you felt comfortable enough to tell me that. But the other thing I wanted to say about what children hear from the other parent is that children hear a lot of things all the time, but children really believe what they feel. And so I had a parent who was dealing with this where the dad was constantly bashing the mom, and the dad was very high conflict, but mom really was like as benign as ever, like doing her best. Like, and she asked her child, like, I know that daddy says these things about me, but have you ever seen me, and tell me because I want to know, because I'm always trying to be a better parent. Have you ever seen me behave this way towards other people in the way that, daddy thinks I behave? And the child was like, well, no, like, you're always like doing nice things for people, and you always say like hi to strangers at Target, and I've never seen you fight with anyone, and daddy's always fighting with people. And it's like, okay, so your child may hear something,
Yeah.
and they may bring it to you to explore it and question it and see what your reaction is going to be, but trust that your child knows who you are. Like, if you don't behave like the person your ex is saying you are, trust that your child knows.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want parents to also feel like this is a pressure to be perfect, because we all are going to have our moments where we don't behave in the way that, we want to. But think of it as an overall relationship. We're not talking about a moment here, a moment there where we lose our cool or where we actually did the thing. It's really like you're talking about the building blocks of your entire relationship, right? So it's this overall sense of security that you're giving your child that is the most valuable thing you can give them.
Mm-hmm.
Pivoting a little bit, I had a couple I worked with last week, actually. And one of the hardest parts, I think, this isn't just of children of divorce, this is really just everything hard in life, is being able to kind of allow the kids to be upset and to have uncomfortable feelings. And so I had the dad, particularly in this situation, was like, okay, we're going to tell them we're getting divorced. And then I'm going to be like, well, it's really exciting because you're going to get, your own room and you're going to get all this new stuff and can I frame it like that? Can I be like, this is actually a good thing?
Yeah, you're telling them how to feel. No thanks.
And it's real. Where does this stem from, Mish? It stems from like our inability to watch our kids be uncomfortable and struggle, which I totally get. It's a lot of times it feels like a reflection on us. It feels like we are doing this to our kids, right? Like we are making them suffer, or we are disappointing them. But we don't want to do this. We don't want to just fix or pretend everything's okay, or just talk about all the positives. And this isn't just, again, with this. This is the same thing that we go through. Even I go through this even with siblings. Like if Liv comes to me, and she did come to me at Disney and said she was really kind of upset that I couldn't go on every roller coaster with her and I couldn't stay extra and I had to come home for Maya's nap, and I'm parenting two very different ages, and she was able to sit with me and be like, I'm feeling jealous, and I wish you would come to me, all this stuff, and I just feel. And this didn't come from PS, her just sitting there and being like, tapping me and being like, I'm feeling really jealous. It came from
Let
a
me
lot of
explore my
back talk.
feelings.
Yeah, no, it came from a lot of back talk and a lot of tears. And then when I pulled her to the side and I was like, tell me how you're feeling, her initial reaction is actually a shutdown. No. And I'm like, you can tell me, we can talk about things. I can handle it. Tell me the truth. But you have to be able to be prepared for what they're going to say without you. Then let's say if she said, I'm jealous, my response can't be, well, your sister loves you very much. Like that can't be my response, right? Like my response has to be honoring the space they're in, and going back to divorce, honoring the space and their process. And they're all going to have different processes. Don't you see this all the time? I have kids who parents tell the kids, they're absolutely fine. Some of them are even feeling relief, honestly, because they've seen so much crap in the home, and that they're like, okay, thank God, peace, when they're a little older. And then there are ones who are not fine, and there are ones who are not fine later, and there are ones who are, there's not just one way.
Well, it's very much like, when your child falls down and scrapes their knee and they're crying because they're scared. They felt that was scary. They weren't expecting that. And you're like, oh, you're fine. You're fine. Right. You're fine. And you know how that felt when that was done to you as a child, or even in an adult relationship with someone who wasn't sensitive to your feelings. You would bring your feelings to them and they'd be like, I don't know why you feel that way. That's what we're doing to our kids. Yeah. And just like you would shut down eventually around that person, your child is going to shut down too. And I think we try to fix for many reasons. I know for myself, fixing is a reactive quality that I have because I don't want my child to feel the struggle that I felt as a kid, right? But then I pull back. Like, for example, this past summer, I sent her to sleepaway camp for the first time. And the first letter home, which they told all the parents, the first letter home is going to send you over the edge. It's going to be terrible. And sure enough, it was. And I was like, I'm texting Bella's dad. I'm telling my husband, I'm like, I'm going up there. I'm going to go get her. I knew she couldn't handle this. I knew she couldn't do it. My initial reaction was, she can't. This is it.
You and I spoke during that time.
Right. I was a shell of myself. I sat right here in the corner of my couch for 3 weeks. I couldn't function. Not only did she come home having the best summer ever, she was able to tell me about things that were hard and how she got through them. Then she also told me she wanted to go next summer for the full summer because she was like, you know what? It was scary and it was hard, but I did it. And had I gone to rescue her in that moment, she never would have known her capabilities and her power. And so when your child is facing a challenge with divorce and they don't like that it's happening, the answer is not, oh, well, I shouldn't have gotten divorced. And it's also not to convince them of why they're going to be great and everything's going to be fine. And 2 rooms makes life so much better. It's this is a hard and scary change. And there may be parts of it that you hate, and there may be parts of it that you love. But no matter which parts, I want to hear about them, and I want to help you through them if I can.
And we're going to figure this out. Like, we're going to be okay. Like, we do want to give a sense of security to them, but yeah, all the process and all the journey in between is okay. Right. Like, that's
Yeah.
really your job.
And I think we want to mitigate this feeling of discomfort for our kids because we don't know how to handle
Yeah.
discomfort sometimes. Most
Yeah.
adults are constantly running to a coping mechanism subconsciously that they don't even realize. It's like add to cart, smoke a cigarette, have a
Yeah.
drink. Like and our kids don't have these skills yet. And so it's like if we just take that feeling away from them, not only do they not have to deal with it, but we don't have to deal with
Yeah.
it. We don't even know how to deal with our own. And that's why they say heal so that your children don't have to heal from you. It
Yeah.
is a very important thing.
Very true thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any last words or piece of advice you would love to kind of leave with? Okay.
If you take nothing else from this podcast, my own daughter's co-parenting therapist said this a couple of months ago, and it just like burned into my soul. Divorce is an adult decision, but it's a child's experience. And to think that your decisions post-divorce or your conflict or your choices, the way you interact won't affect them just because the divorce is done is wrong. You have to recognize that the choice you made is the experience your child has to live. And you can't control how your ex is choosing to live that experience, but you can control your own.
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you always.
Thank you for having me.
Subscribe to Help Them Bloom with Evelyn Mendal wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's bloom together.